After owning this car for a couple of years, I was ready for a change. I got tired of bringing a hat to a car meet, so I decided it's time for a manual swap. What really put me over the edge, I put a video up on Facebook of an issue for a noise. I couldn't figure out what was going on, and one of the top comments was, "Sounds like an automatic," which was hurtful. So I decided it's time to do something different. I probably spent about 4 times as long actually researching this compared to actually doing the swap itself. The Z4 came with a variety of engines, transmissions. So for my 2007 3.0 coupe, it came with the N52 engine, and the particular transmission was the G36 37BZ. I ran into a few problems trying to find this transmission. They weren't nearly as available as some of the other ones. They were a bit more expensive, closer to $2,000 just for the transmission. But I was also really looking for a complete kit, which cost even more. So I started to look for an alternative, the 17BG that was fit also to an N52 engine. That model did have lower horsepower and torque, but they did fit in some later BMW models that actually had comparable horsepower and torque. So we'll give it a shot and see what happens. I actually bought all these parts close to a year ago, but then my wife decided that we needed new master bathrooms, so instead of paying someone, I decided I'd spend a year completely demolishing and retiling a bathroom, and that way with all the money I saved, I'll manual swap and do some other crazy stuff to a BMW. This is the transmission and swap kit I ended up getting off of eBay. I made sure it had a VIN so I could make sure it was in an accident and didn't have a mechanical failure, and that I wasn't about to buy the mechanical failure. The kit came fairly complete with a lot of the hardware. Just from looking at real OEM of how much each one of these little hardware pieces cost, you'll get nickel to dime to death if you don't find a kit that's pretty complete. I ended up spending just under $1,200 for the kit, which I think is pretty good. The struggle started immediately. I couldn't get the shift knob off the top of the lever, so I had to just sawzall it off. I wanted to use the Garagistic Supreme short throw shifter. I called them and asked for their thickest and longest. They asked me not to call again. You did have to do a small modification to the boot. You have to do a little trim on the inside just because it's a little bit thicker, but overall it looks pretty good. I'm sure some of you at this point are thinking that this is going to be a huge waste of money, but I think you're wrong. I made a video a while ago that no one watched, and I'm okay with that, about the prices for Z4s for manuals versus automatics. At least for the coupe, there's a fairly substantial premium for the manuals over the autos. Well, I think this is worthwhile. I'm making this after I finished the whole swap. I'm looking back, this is by far the worst part. There's absolutely no easy way to work in here. This is with the car jacked up. I saw some other videos of people working on E86s where they actually remove the seat and kind of lay in there, but I just don't think there's enough room in this. The plastic trim in the footwell already had a slot for the clutch. You just have to start by removing it. The bracket that the clutch and brake pedal attached to is the same in autos and manuals, so you just have to start by removing the brake pedal from the automatic. The brake pedal is attached in 2 places where it pivots on top and then to the actuator to the brake booster, and both of these are extremely hard to get off. You can see here on the manual pedal it's held on by these 2 clips. You basically have to pry up the center part and then to get it to slide out. I was able to get both of these off. From the BMW service manual, it says you can somehow just slide this off. I found it to be almost impossible without actually removing the bolts that hold on the bracket to the car itself. When getting ready to install the clutch, there's already 2 holes for the in and out for the clutch master cylinder. I was missing one cover, so there's always warm air blowing into my legs. The clutch pedal install is fairly straightforward. There's just a small spring that connects to the top of the mounting bracket and has little rubber grommets. This is looking down from the brake booster towards the cab. You can see that small hole we're going to feed the line through that's going to attach to the brake reservoir. This is the path that the hose will take from the clutch master cylinder to connect to the brake reservoir. A quick aside, you will absolutely need a crawler with an adjustable headrest. Trust me, you will want this. So to get the transmission out, first you'll have to remove the exhaust, multiple heat shields, a couple braces. There's a few videos I'll link in the description that I've looked at where they do this when the car's on the lift and it goes into a much better detail. I largely made these just so I could remember what's the exact orientation that everything goes, where various bolts go as well. Do yourself a favor as you start removing nuts and bolts. This is the technique I like to use. I draw little diagrams exactly where things go, and I store them all in baggies, and then I save them in a large container so I'll remember where everything goes. The transmission jack can be a pretty good companion to help you hold up the exhaust while you remove everything, especially if you can't convince your wife to climb underneath the car with you to hold up an exhaust. So the drive shaft for the manual and automatic, the manual is on top. The rear section is the same. The front section is much longer for the manual compared to the automatic. The rear sections do have different part numbers, but they do appear otherwise identical. They have the same spline and then the same attachment on the rear end. The automatic transmission is pretty straightforward. Move the actuator cable, disconnect the O2 sensors from the exhaust, and make sure to drain the oil. Overall, it really wasn't too difficult to remove. This transmission did come with a cooler. It bolts up to those two holes there. The pipes then thread around and up and mount the oil pan. They use these brackets that hold both the lines, and a bolt goes to the center. They clip shut, then you have to use a screwdriver to pry them up. The pipes continue to go above the steering rack, and there's none of those same clips there. You have to remove both of them and disconnect them from the radiator cooler to really get them off. With the transmission on the jack and lowered a little bit, it's pretty easy to access all the bolts and get it removed. My flex plate did somehow get stuck to the crankshaft and was a little difficult to remove. Your car does have to be up pretty high. These are on quick jacks just to be able to accommodate everything. My rear main seal actually looked pretty good. Didn't see any signs of leakage. The oil pan gasket, however, is why everything is covered in oil and is needing to be dealt with. Back up on the top of the car, you can start pulling up the automatic transmission harness. It just attaches to the clip here. You are going to want to save this as you're going to need it to be able to hook up the reverse switch from the manual transmission later. Removing the gear shift lever for the automatic transmission is pretty straightforward. If you're planning on doing this, yours is going to look different. I had mice cohabitating in here for a while, so I had to cut away a lot of the carpet, and also I have a whole bunch of other wires running for the aftermarket stereo. There's basically just 3 bolts that hold it in place. The actuator cable to the automatic transmission, and then that black line that you see in front here was a park safety switch, I think. Once that's out, you are going to want to fill up the smaller hole the grommet went through for the actuator cable. I ordered one of these but I lost it, so I instead used a plug from Harbor Freight and just took that line out of the rubber grommet. It sits pretty well in there, pretty tight. It's covered up by heat shield, so it's not going to be overly exposed to the elements, but it sits pretty good in there and I think it'll do the job. So with that out of the way, I can finally get ready to do what I've been waiting a long time to finally get done. Of course, it's not how it goes in, but I couldn't help myself. Subscribe to see how the rest of this goes.